All right, welcome in all. Thank you all for being here. As you're coming in, we'd love to know a little bit more about who is participating with us today. So please share with us in the chat a little bit about where you're joining from, your school or district, your grade level of focus, and the role that you have. We'd love to learn a little bit more about you as we're just getting started. We'll give a few minutes for everybody to join the room. Make sure that we've got everybody on board before we take off. So please tell us a little bit more about who you are in the chat. Great to see so many people joining. A few different roles represented, which is wonderful to see all the different people who have interest and passion for STEM, bringing it closer to our students, and all the different ways that we can make that happen from the district to the classroom. Great to have you. Wonderful. All right, we're going to give about one more minute for everyone to join us, share a little bit about who they are and where they're joining from in the chat, and then we'll get started in about 1 minute. Great. All right, a few different districts represented here today, which is great to see across Texas the emphasis and interest in STEM, and a few different kinds of roles, whether we're coming from elementary STEM, thinking more on the CTE side. There's a lot of different ways that we can apply STEM. It's a pretty large umbrella that a lot of things can fall under, so it's great to see all the different ways that people are finding to bring it to our students. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. To introduce myself to be matching your energy in the chat, I am Hope Thompson. I'm a senior manager of curriculum and instruction at NextWave STEM. I'm a former educator myself. I taught elementary science in Baltimore and a general elementary teacher in Chicago Public Schools. Across my career, I've seen curriculum and instruction for robotics and STEM implemented from pre-K all the way up through 12, which I love to mention because a lot of the time when we think STEM in particular, we don't always see or think of pre-K students and their involvement. But I've gotten to see that every student has a place in STEM, and there's a place for STEM in every classroom. So it's really informed my approach to STEM and the emerging tech that we work with here at NextWave. And I'm excited to share with you a few different ways that STEM can look in your schools and districts. We're also joined by Rafael Childress. Do you want to say hello, Rafael?
Hello, everyone. Welcome so much to this discussion about applying STEM to TEKS. I am the Texas Regional Manager for NextWave STEM, and I welcome you to if you have any questions, if you would like to meet at a later date and have just a general conversation. You may not be looking now, but if you'd like to see how we would necessarily apply NextWave STEM to your particular needs, please feel free. I will put my email in the chat, and you're more than welcome to reach out to me.
And we're also joined by Dr. Cynthia Hodges from Killeen ISD.
Hi, everyone. I'm Cynthia Hodges with Killeen Independent School District, and I'm the Director for Innovative Programs and STEM with the district. Our program is K through 12.
Great. Well, to get started, to get a little bit more context on who's with us in their approach to STEM so far, what schools are currently doing for STEM, what districts are currently doing to address STEM as a priority. Can you tell me a little bit about what your approach to STEM currently looks like on this scale from 1 to 4? So 1 being we're interested in integrating STEM, but we don't yet have a STEM program or curriculum. 2, we've implemented some STEM initiatives. We have some standalone projects. Maybe we have a STEM day at school, a STEM night, or an after-school club. Number 3 is we have a STEM curriculum or resource that's something we rely on more consistently, but we're still working at building buy-in and fidelity when implementing this across the school or the district. Or 4, maybe you have a really successful year-round in-school STEM curriculum or in-school program for all grade levels that is happening within the school day and has repeated resources that your teachers are returning to. We'd love to know a little bit more about where you currently are so that we can help tailor our conversation today to those needs in particular. So if you could just drop a number into the chat, let us know where you are from 1 to 4, roughly on this scale. All right, seeing already a lot of 2s and 3s, which is wonderful that we're already starting with some initiatives, maybe even a curriculum or resource. Maybe we're really feeling like that has been successful and it is something all students are getting access to, but we just want to have a better understanding of what is out there. Great to see so many 2s and 3s and even 4s in the chat. Wonderful. NextWave STEM actually surveyed some schools and found that 70% of the schools we surveyed had no STEM curriculum whatsoever outside of the occasional STEM night or project. So we find a lot of schools just don't really know where to begin. So it's great to see that the districts that are represented here today have started that process and are thinking about what the best way to bring STEM to their students is. At NextWave STEM, we believe the world needs young innovators, so we offer hands-on activities, curricula, workshops designed to give students confidence to express creativity and learn how to fail without fear. And the things that I think are most impactful to students and teachers in that statement are the coming together of the skills in STEM, as well as the attitudes and practices of engineers and of scientists, and creativity alongside those skills, and the practices of taking risks in the classroom and feeling confident in the iterative process, which is so important to STEM. And our goal is to empower teachers of today to prepare students for careers of the future, but increasingly careers of today. The way that the STEM landscape has evolved, even in the past few years, means that a lot of our students are graduating into a world where these skills are needed immediately. These jobs are already in existence. These technologies are already in their lives, and we're giving them the tools to interact with them efficiently, effectively, ethically in the world that they're living in. So when we talk about STEM, we can use this as sort of a really general umbrella term. I want us to think about 3 major pillars of what STEM means, beyond just science, technology, engineering, and math. One being the process and behaviors of scientists and engineers, engaging with the engineering and design process, asking questions and creating solutions to problems, and then taking that idea through the iterative process of creating a solution, testing that solution, and constantly improving and re-engaging with this process. Also, we think about technology, exposing students to technology, utilizing tools in the classroom that have their own value in showing students what the world of technology includes and can look like. What is the outcome of engaging in this process? It builds buy-in for students. It shows them a little bit more physical examples of what this process can result in. And it gives them, importantly, something to practice, a vehicle to use some of the skills, that 3rd pillar on. So really building those skills in technology applications, as they're referred to in TEKS, but those computer science foundational skills that include, for our youngest students, being able to decompose a problem into steps And for our oldest students, having measurable skills in text-based coding, for example, and increasing complexity and difficulty when it comes to those computer science skills. So we're going to really think about using these three different pillars of STEM to find ways to bring STEM into the classroom during the school day, especially to make sure that all students get access to this content. And when we think about those in-school programs, we see two various ways of implementing. One being standalone STEM instruction for schools who can provide the time in the school day, some in after-school clubs, where students are dedicated to those three pillars and to reaching those STEM goals. But we also see a lot of programs where schools don't necessarily have protected time for STEM programming. And those are schools where integrating STEM into core subjects may be more appropriate. Finding ways to integrate technology, the engineering process, or even those computer science skills into ELA and math and science to make the most of the school day while also getting those additional TEKS standards covered. And today we're going to start by looking at some standalone STEM instruction. So for our schools that have STEM as an elective or alongside art and music, or even able to carve out some time in the school day, among other core subjects, we know those minutes are hard to find, but for schools who are able to protect time for standalone STEM instruction, we're going to look at what those can look like. And we're going to start with the TEKS application standards through TEKS. And from K through 8, these TEKS application standards have 5 major areas that the standards break out into. And they are computational thinking, which for our youngest students is just about decomposing problems, taking parts of a story, parts of instructions, and breaking them down. Sequential instructions, thinking algorithmically. As we move up towards 2nd, 3rd grade, we're able to start deepening that complexity. And even for our older students, beginning to code sequences. So creating algorithms with loops, conditionals, which are if-then thinking, variables, and taking that ability to decompose a problem, think sequentially, and apply it directly to a technology, to a computer science program. As well as creativity and innovation. So while students are developing these skills, they're engaging with the design process. They're working through those engineering skills and behaviors of tenacity, confidence. They're engaging with ideas around creativity and thinking critically about the solutions that they're building. But they're also looking at emerging technology and its impacts. So how do we see robotics show up in our world? How do we see AI show up in our world? Data literacy management and representation. These are TEKS that are dedicated to collecting and sorting data, using that data to answer questions, make decisions, and communicating with that data. Meanwhile, students also are accountable for having a sense of digital citizenship, understanding social interactions in digital environments, how to do so safely, the understanding around privacy and security, not only for self, but for systems, and ethics and laws around the use of these emerging technologies. And then practical technology concepts. Things like using a variety of apps and tools with fluency, understanding tech systems and operations, and then creating and revising digital artifacts. That can be a document, that can be a 3D designed object file. There's a lot of different things that can fall under that particular phrase of digital artifacts, but the skills persist throughout all of the different media that students may be using. And for our middle schoolers, those tech standards deepen in their complexity. Students are thinking more algorithmically along the lines of debugging their programs, having to go back and do some backwards planning to figure out what went wrong, which is a part of the process that is really integral to coding, can't be skipped. Students need to have that fluency in thinking through what's gone wrong in that trial and error. They're doing a little bit more of the coding for problem solving in particular, not just to build those skills, but also to build them towards creating a solution, which plays into those creativity and innovation standards as well. They're looking at that design process for problem solving and how it shows up in the real world across industries. How do different career paths allow me to engage in the design process? And we're not just looking at emerging technology and its impact as it exists, but we're thinking about trends and where it's heading. The data literacy skills that we developed as K-5 students, we're now pushing towards using that data to make inferences and predictions. Again, looking forward towards problem solving and trends beyond just the understanding. Our digital citizenship TEKS are going to push our students to understand more about intellectual property, how misinformation and information is shared in digital spaces. And we're also going to pursue those privacy, safety, and security understandings around systems as well as self, and including those practical technology concepts where students are getting a little bit more comfortable with using digital media, their different tech systems and operations, not just the physical, but also the digital space, understanding both hardware and software. So these TEKS are more specific on a line-by-line basis, understanding exactly what students need to be able to do. They need to have the ability to code with loops and a repeated command, and when it is appropriate to use a loop to make a program more efficient, for example. But keeping a sort of broader view, those 5 major areas come up again and again from K all the way through 8. For our high school TEKS, those tech standards become more career specific. They fall under CTE TEKS like information technology, manufacturing and engineering. We'll talk about a few of them today, but for the technical applications, those are only for our K-8. That's of course not the only place where some of these STEM ideas show up. We see them in our science and engineering practices as well, which we'll talk about a little bit more when we look at integrated STEM time as opposed to standalone. What standalone STEM time allows us to do is to focus in on these technical applications through a lot of different pathways. When we look at different emerging technologies, there's, as we can see, 7 different examples here, but many different ways that we can get access to those technologies that allow students to practice with those skills. We are looking at NextWave STEM's course chart right now, which includes 7 pathways in robotics, drones, AI literacy, 3D technology and digital fabrication, innovation, sustainability, and game design. And to different extents, each of these topics can be a great way to bring those technical application standards to your students, whether it's on the creativity and innovation side, which is really going to be expressed in our 3D technology and digital fabrication pathway, which is also going to have some of those technical digital artifact skills. Or we're thinking more about data collection and communication, which is something that shows up in sustainability. Students are growing plants and practicing with more data literacy. But for the purposes of an example, we're going to look through a robotics course, which is many schools, many districts' first foray into STEM through a robotics program of some kind, whether it starts as an after-school program or we have the ability to bring it into the classroom. For our youngest students, K-2, those technology application TEKS are focusing on a very abstract conceptual idea of the sequential thinking and algorithmic thinking that students will need. And it also helps students to practice breaking down their own worlds into smaller pieces. The stories that they hear can help them understand sequential thinking. The instructions that we ask our students to receive and give help students to think sequentially and algorithmically. So with a very simple robot, so for example, this Code and Go, we call it Colby, Colby, the robot, has buttons right on the robot's body itself. They're not coding elsewhere, but they're starting to get an understanding of thinking sequentially. I can't just press and hold this button to move my robot around. I need to plan out the steps it needs to take in order to get to the cheese. They're also thinking through stories with this thinking. They are using the Colby to draw numbers, to problem solve, and build some of those basic coding skills that they'll apply later on in more complex ways. So you can see in this orange box just a few examples of what those TEKS look like on a more granular level. So this is just the computational thinking, that very first area, and is including some of the very specific skills that students need. Identifying simple patterns found in solutions to everyday problems, creating simple algorithms for an everyday task, which is a great way to introduce students to the concept of an algorithm, but also then creating sequences that help solve problems. For 3rd through 5th graders, they have been prepared to go a little bit more deeply into the coding softwares that are available to students. So they can begin to code through block-based programming on a separate device and then uploading that code to a robot that they have helped assemble. So those robots are tracking and following lines, they're responding with sound, they're flashing lights, they're moving around as students have coded these activities to them. So students are competing in a dance competition, they're trying to park their robot in a parking space that you've set out on the classroom floor or on the desk. But they're building on those same skills that they had in K through 2. Their ability to think sequentially, to work backwards from a goal. They're just having a little bit more complexity in what those skills look like. In this case, they're also really working within the design process. So even though they're not building a physical something to represent this engineering and design process, they are designing a digital solution. And they're going through that process of testing, improving, testing again, until they have a successful solution. And I wanted to include in this one as well, so in that purple box, our TEKS here includes the creativity and innovation aspect. They're getting to experience some practice in that engineering and design process and working collaboratively with their classmates as well. So getting those 21st century skills as well in collaboration, critical thinking, collaboration, and communication. Our 6th through 8th graders, we want to start pushing our students into understanding how these skills play out in the world around them. What sort of problem solving do we see showing up in the world of, again, robotics as an example, but each of these emerging technologies. So we're going to have students engaging with more specific skills like conditional thinking, if then, response to different objects, sensors, understanding a little bit more deeply how robotics is used in the world around them. So students here will see again those examples of the creativity and innovation TEKS around technology, where students are engaging in design process, either independently or with a group. They're using goal setting. In NextWave STEM's 6 through 8 program, our students aren't just participating in competitions, they're designing competitions and challenging their classmates to meet those goals and expectations. They're also looking at how we see the design process show up in industries, how we see robotics show up in industries. Students come into the classroom with plenty of ideas around what technology looks like, where they've engaged with robotics in their world. And so then they get an opportunity to make the connection between their classroom activities and their idea of robotics in the world. And for our high school students, especially within the high school schedule, if we have a chance to provide that standalone STEM programming, we can really help push our students towards the skills that prepare them for careers. So at the high school level, our students are thinking about what do careers look like in this category, in this emerging technology with these skills that I've been building, and how can I continue to refine those skills and be prepared upon graduation. So our high school students will explore robotics as it's used in manufacturing and simulate some of those processes through coding with more advanced robotics examples. So using the microbit and a lot of different extensions, sensors, conveyor belts, motors can simulate how robotics is used in manufacturing and what those processes look like. In this case, because we're no longer looking at those technology applications TEKS, we're looking instead to specific career and technical education standards at the high school level. A program like the robotics for manufacturing can look like fundamentals of computer science for students to develop or deepen those same skills in coding, algorithmic thinking, using variables and loops and conditionals, or more specifically, engineering applications of computer science principles, pushing that into a particular industry and how these computer science ideas show up in engineering alongside some of those more physical fabrication skills, or in manufacturing engineering technology. Another example of a more industry-specific skill or set of standards that this sort of program can touch on. Now, for an example of what standalone STEM instruction can look like and has looked like in Texas, I'm going to toss it over to Dr. Hodges to share a little bit about Killeen ISD's approach to standalone STEM instruction.
So for the 24-25 school year, we implemented the YES program, Young Engaged Scholars, for a specific set of third grade students and seventh grade students who we felt like we could impact their passing rate on the STAR exam, both in reading and mathematics. And we did that by utilizing the NextWave STEM curriculum. So for 2 hours every Saturday, one Saturday a month, they did RLLA, reading and writing and reading about the STEM projects that they were going to participate in for the next 2 hours. So from 8 o'clock to 12 o'clock, they were engaged in reading, language arts, writing, and then they had their NextWave STEM project. And in the afternoon, they had a fine arts experience. So we had one group who did visual arts, theater arts, and then we had the third group who did orchestra. So they were actually learning to play the violin and gave a concert. So these students, these scholars, 30 in the third grade and 30 in the seventh grade, met once a month for the majority of last school year. And then during the summer, they had an intensive 3-week program where they actually culminated in going to NASA and having an overnight trip there. Each quarter, we also did a field trip for the students, either connecting something through fine arts or something through STEM. And so we used the NextWave curriculum to do the robots, they did the drones, and they also did some of the arcade and game planning for the curriculum. So we introduced them to the concept one Saturday, and then the next Saturday they were able to delve deeper into either the robots or to whatever the NextWave curriculum that we were planning for that particular Saturday. We did have very successful results in third grade with impacting and improving their STAR scores, both in reading and mathematics. Seventh grade was a little dicey. Middle school can be middle school. Most of you probably understand that. We had some success there, but we're looking this year to change the seventh grade group to sixth grade. And we're going to continue with the third grade cohort, moving them to fourth grade, and then add a new third grade component. So our parents were able to apply to participate They were selected based upon whether or not we felt like we could really impact their STAR scores with just a little bit more attention. They were given access to a reading program outside of the Saturdays. So they had reading side of extracurricular assignments to do, but all based around either the coding that they were going to be doing, flying the drones, doing the arcades. And so trying just to keep them interested in the reading part through STEM and then through the fine arts program. So we are again asking our board to support our year 2 and looking forward to even better being able to impact the STAR scores and the achievement of our students through a 3-pronged approach, but based in STEM, and then allowing them the opportunity to experience some exposure to things that they probably wouldn't have had an opportunity at the elementary or middle schools that they participate in throughout the year.
Thank you so much. So what about our schools that do not have the ability to protect time for students to complete standalone STEM instruction? For many of our schools and districts, as much as STEM is a priority or an initiative across the district or school, in reality, there's not very much time throughout the school day to dedicate when there are so many goals to be reached through our math, ELA, and science instruction as well. So for those schools, those districts, integrating STEM into core subjects is really the best way to proceed. Finding ways to double up on standards alignment so that your math, your ELA, your science, your social studies time can be dedicated to those goals, but also to support students in either the technology applications, the engineering and design process, or those standards that kind of can do both. So for our science and STEM especially, there's a lot of opportunity for some overlap, which is not to say that science and STEM is the only way to make it happen. Our AI courses allow students to build chatbots that behave in a certain way. Perhaps this is a really playful chatbot. This is a pedantic chatbot. We're giving students an opportunity to work with tone in their writing. Or maybe they're designing one that is acting exactly like the character from their recent novel study. Students are getting those technology application skills of coding and designing a digital artifact, but they're also getting to demonstrate some of their ELA skills. So there's a lot of different ways for especially a STEM program like ours that has those ELA and math standards supported to find a place and time in the core subjects as well. For one example of how we can bring a technology and some of those skills into a core subject, we're going to look at hydroponics and bringing it into some plant life and biology standards. So across different grades, here are a few examples of standard 12 and 13 around organisms and environments. For our kindergartners, that's going to mean the basics of what plants need: air, sunlight, water, nutrients in the soil, which we'll be playing on when we think about hydroponics, bringing those nutrients without soil, and a place to grow. Our second graders are able to think a little bit more specifically about the parts and processes of a plant, identifying different pieces of a plant and comparing those structures and how they help them meet their basic needs. Fourth graders thinking a little bit more broadly around relationships within environments, about how plants and other producers can make their own food using sunlight, water, carbon dioxide, or through the cycling of matter. For our sixth graders, understanding the ecosystems, how conservation and technology can help manage all the different resources. And for high school biology students, the structures and functions of transport, reproduction, and response in plants. We can also bring hydroponics into these standards as well. So these are just the TEKS I want you to keep in mind as we think about hydroponics. Maybe there's a grade level in particular that is a focus for your school or district. Maybe if you're a classroom teacher, you're thinking specifically about your 7th graders. But keep these TEKS in mind as we look at hydroponics and how bringing in a hydroponic shelving unit and the corresponding technologies can not only breathe new life into these plant life units that students have probably had some exposure to before and our teachers have done for a long time, but also get access to the technologies that are emerging that initiate and sustain an interest in students and a lot of buy-in, but also some of those science and engineering skills and applications. So for our K-2 students, using a hydroponic unit like this one, where students are growing without soil, they're learning all of the opportunities that they had in their standard plant life unit to identify parts of the plant needs. But they're getting to see a little bit about what the engineering and design process has resulted in the context of plant science. They're getting to see this hydroponic system growing without soil, especially for our youngest students who maybe have not had the exposure to the specifics of nutrients in the soil versus just the soil. It can be really exciting to see this technology seem to defy their understanding of what's possible. And that opens doors to have a deeper understanding of what plants need. So they're also getting some of those standard science TEKS covered in terms of their exposure to different read alouds to support their exploration of the growth that students are really getting to have a hands-on example of alongside those typical germination techniques. So for NextWave STEM's unit, our K-2 students grow your classic seed on a wet paper towel in a bag on the windowsill alongside this newer technology and getting to compare and contrast. Our 3rd through 5th graders are getting to a lot of practice in those data techniques, that data collection, communication that we spoke about in our technology applications TEKS at the beginning. They're getting a lot of opportunity to do that. So our 3rd through 5th grade course is really designed around how students can be involved in designing experiments to more deeply understand this topic, what plants need and what changes we can make, making pH a factor in their experiments, taking data long-term and understanding, interpreting, and communicating that data. Those are TEKS standards that students are getting access to in this content beyond just the science, but also bringing in the technology. Our middle school students, our 6th through 8th grade students, with that same technology, that same hydroponic shelf, can think about problem solving and how the impacts and trends of these technologies can impact the world that they live in. They think more critically around hydroponics as a solution to food insecurity, to space travel, designing solutions for the future with this technology and where it's headed, alongside some of those data collection and communication skills. And for our 9th grade students, we broaden the lens. We think, where does hydroponics and other sustainable practice fit into the world of agricultural science? So again, pushing towards those CTE aspects and thinking, what careers does this interest or these skills prepare me for? What does this technology say about the trends that we see emerging across industries and between industries? Students are exploring things like agribusiness, growing wheatgrass, blending that wheatgrass into a health drink, and then designing a business plan to take that health drink to market. Students get to find those connections between different disciplines and think more holistically in a way that prepares them for careers. So this is just one example of how one single technology can provide opportunities without disrupting the core school day, those protected hours for those core subjects. If your school's not ready, your district's not ready, or just realistically is not finding it possible, despite efforts or hopes to the contrary, that there's time in the classroom for standalone STEM, integrating these STEM topics, skills, and technologies in the core science subjects or all core subjects can bring students to both goals, those TEKS that you're trying to cover in ELA and math, as well as the technology applications or the CTE specifics for our high schoolers. So NextWave STEM has already thought through all of these alignments pretty critically. For our courses, we have that connection to national standards like the CSTA, the Computer Science Teachers, ISD, NGSS, and some national ELA and math support, but also and specifically those technology or science TEKS as are most appropriate. So for our hydroponics course, we're going to focus in on those science TEKS certainly, but those technology applications are not ignored. They're included as well. Whereas our game design course around creating a playable, testable video game our students are designing independently or collaboratively with groups, that's going to focus on those technology applications TEKS. We include these standards in our content. The national standards are right in our lesson plan, but we also include the TEKS, the Texas state-specific standards in our scope and sequence documents. And so we have a lot of different opportunities to make those connections. If you're more focused on finding the TEKS ELA and math, we're more than happy to work with you in that way. But the technology and or science are most often already included and named in our content. Additionally, we are already approved as a curriculum vendor in 80% of Texas districts. So if you are interested in our content, there's a very good chance that we can ensure a pretty seamless integration into your district's classrooms. So when we think about a NextWave STEM course, I want to be really specific about what I'm describing for each one of our pathways and grade bands, where they come together. So K through 2 robotics, 6 through 8 3D printing, 9 through 12 agricultural science. Each one of those is a 15-lesson course, which includes our teacher's guides, which are highly scripted or highly supportive, nearly scripted. So if your teachers are really comfortable with these emerging technologies, great, they can use them as a guideline. If it's their first time coding with students, they can follow them to the letter. They're highly supportive. This also includes a presentation for every lesson, which is going to serve as your visual aid for your students. All the student worksheets, answer keys, and assessments. We have both formative and summative assessments throughout the course that help you track your students' learning on each of these skills, the technology TEKS, or the science as the topic dictates, as well as a scope and sequence document, which goes lesson by lesson and shows that alignment to the standards so that you can draw a straight line from what your students are doing to your TEKS. And all of this is hosted on an online teaching portal with self-paced PD resources for teachers to review at their pace to brush up on all of the content as well as the lesson activities throughout the course. And this is a last look at our course chart, what our offerings are. So along that top row, you're going to see the 7 different pathways that we offer: robotics, drones, AI, and game design. That one on the far right, those are our most computer science aligned. So those TEKS around algorithmic thinking, working with coding in the complexity that varies from simple algorithms or thinking through them for our K through 2 students, all the way up to including variables and loops and conditionals for our older students. Those 4 pathways are going to focus on that aspect of TEKS. Our 3D technology and design provides students a lot of opportunity to engage in the engineering and design process. Our youngest students, K through 2, are not using a 3D printer yet, but they're engaging with the process. 3rd through 12, that's 3D printing with a machine. Innovation entrepreneurship really gives students a chance to explore the trends and emerging technologies, those engineering and design process and the outcome as it relates to invention and innovation. And sustainability, also seeing how the technology connects to life sciences, how the collection and communication of that data is changing the world around us in a long-term sustainable way. So each one of these squares, or boxes, I should say, is one of those 15 lesson courses with all of the resources, teachers' guides, presentations, and supportive resources included. So if you're interested in one or all of those different topics and how you can design a program that meets the needs of your school or district, please check out our curriculum samples or book some time with Rafael, who's dropped his schedule into the chat. We'd be happy to work with you to figure out just how this needs to look for your school and your district to be successful, whether that's standalone or integrated. We can find the best fit for your program. I'm more than happy to dive into the TEKS with you to find additional supported standards if you want to do, especially an integrated program where we're looking through different ways that math and ELA and science can bring technology in. We're more than happy to be a partner with you in that way. But the way that our course content is currently designed is aligned to the TEKS that we went over here today. We want that to be something that is supportive for you, so that STEM does not become something else to think about, but is instead a really enriching part of your school day. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your time that you've taken to learn a little bit more about STEM and what it can look like in your classroom. Please feel free to book time with Rafael, stick around and ask questions after. But best of luck, and we hope we can be a partner with you in bringing STEM to your classroom in a consistent, successful, and sustainable way. Thank you very much.